So today I was watching Breakthrough News, and I really like Breakthrough News. I think it's with Eugene Pierre. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And there was Rania Khalek, who's recently joined the team, and Sierra Taylor, who I'm not familiar with, but I think she's an artist, and another guy who I missed his name altogether. I think his name is Juan, but I can't be sure. Anyway, so I was watching them, and they were introducing themselves, and I'll just call this guy Juan. I'm sorry, Juan, if that's not your name.
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling great to be outside. It's such nice weather outside. Like I've been able to bike, which I haven't been doing since like last summer. So I was like gasping yesterday, but you know,
that's all right.
One pedal at a time. I'm sorry.
Hey, look, you got to play yourself in shape. Got to play yourself in shape. I respect that. Sierra Taylor, popular educator, grassroots organizer, and artist. Welcome back to the Freedom Side.
Thank you for having me. One, I thought vegans don't get cold. You shouldn't have had a problem biking in the winter.
Not cold. Oh no.
Vegans don't get cold.
We're already making just strong judgments. Because we're minute 30 seconds into the show.
Yeah, I am.
What's that?
Wow, all right. A vegan who does CrossFit.
Haven't had any meat in like 13 years.
That's big. Well, don't eat it. You'll be very sick. But
why do vegans always have to tell you that?
Wow, this was just a lot of just shots fired from Sierra.
I just missed one.
Doesn't endorse any of this.
I miss you too, Sierra.
I have a confession. I was a vegan for 8 years, and then I stopped being one. And I don't feel bad about it, but I respect you on.
I don't feel bad.
It's hard.
Well, I'm glad we could get a little respect in here as we start the show. I mean, we've only had Fast and Furious. We have people taking shots at people's lifestyle choices. Yeah. So let us turn to something that's actually serious before we get carried away here.
He said, I started bicycling outside and it's really cold. And then Sierra Taylor says, I thought that vegans didn't get cold. And, was sort of having a little go at him. Then at some point, just about 10 seconds later, one said, I haven't eaten meat for 15 years, or something like that, or 10 years. Now, I'll get back to what the problem is with that particular statement, I haven't eaten meat for 10 years. But so then Sierra Taylor says, I don't know why, and she's kind of half joking, but also a bit frustrated, says, I don't know why vegans have to tell everybody that. Then sort of Eugene kind of pipes in and says, let's not start, shooting at the hip and sort of thing at one another, kind of basically, they're all having a bit of a giggle at themselves. And Rania says, vegan, that's really good. I was vegan for 8 years and then I stopped. It's hard, she said. Now, I love Rania, and I'm going to get back to that comment in a minute. And then Eugene says, now let's not be, having a go at other people's lifestyle choices. And they all kind of giggled together, and then they went on to the topic that they were supposed to be talking about. So you might be asking, okay, so what am I going to talk about this? Well, firstly, because of this time in history, at some point in the future, it could be 5 years away or 10, people are going to be embarrassed about how they talked about this very, very, very important moral imperative to go vegan. Firstly, vegan is an ethical position. Veganism is an ethical position. The word was coined in 1944 by Donald Watson, and it was about the ethics of not using animals, not using them as resources and things. He decided, this is Donald Watson, he decided he was vegetarian, and he realized that dairy and eggs and other products like that were the result of tremendous violence. And dairy, in fact, is more of a violent industry than the beef, in quotes, industry. And so is the egg industry. The egg industry is horrific too. And I'll leave a link to what's wrong with vegetarianism. Okay, so he saw the problem with that. He saw the problem with what was wrong with vegetarianism, and he moved to veganism. And good on him for that. And that started and of course, there have been vegans throughout history, but they didn't call themselves vegan. He coined that term. There have been vegans like 1,000 years ago. There was somebody called Al-Amari, I think his name was, a Syrian blind poet who actually wrote a poem about his veganism. So there have been vegans in history. It's just that they wouldn't have called themselves vegan, obviously. So back to this, the breakthrough news. So when I say that people will be embarrassed one day with how they spoke about this issue, is because imagine, say, 60 years ago, when you see some of the cringeworthy, and there's still cringeworthy stuff now about racism, right? But, at one point, the way people talked about people of color and black people, there was some very, very obvious racism in that, and even up until this century, until it's been something that there has been really overt racism. There's still racism in a lot of stuff today, but there was extremely overt stuff. And there are movies now and books that have got extreme racism in them, which is really cringeworthy. And so people aren't in a hurry to recommend those movies or those programs or those news, whatever, that these existed in. And there was even a show, I remember, in the 70s, the black and white minstrel show where they wore black makeup and pretended to be black Americans and dancing and singing and all that sort of thing. With you can look that one up. There's all sorts of things that were very overt, and people cringe at that now. A lot of people cringe at it now. Of course, as I say, there's still heaps of racism around now, heaps of racist stuff, and it's covert or overt. But there were times back then where it was widely accepted as okay. There was different things that were widely accepted as okay, and now most people cringe at that. That's what's going to happen in the future when there are people kind of joking about or having a go at someone in a kind of a gentle way, but still having a go at them about being vegan or saying that it's a lifestyle, unquote. That's about as cringeworthy to me as when people say that LGBT people are engaging in a lifestyle. It's not a lifestyle anymore. Being vegan is not a lifestyle any more than being anti-racist is a lifestyle. We have to think about veganism as an ethical position. It was always meant to be an ethical position. It's what people have done with it since that has turned it into other things, like a way to lose weight, or about the environment. Focusing on the environment and not acknowledging that we're killing 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals every year for simply trivial reasons and mostly palate pleasure, particularly when we don't need animal products at all to survive. We can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we're engaging in this is for our palate pleasure, basically, and because we think they taste good. And that's not morally justifiable. But the fact that we're saying things like I'm vegan for the environment is a bit like saying, and excuse this comparison, but it's a bit like saying that the Holocaust should have ended. They should have stopped killing people in gas chambers in Auschwitz and elsewhere because the pollution was badly affecting the environment. That's what focusing on, say, the environment and not acknowledging that it's really all about non-humans and that they're sentient and we don't have a right to use them, and that should be at the core of it all. Yes, there are lots of ancillary benefits of becoming vegan, but the important reason to be vegan is because we don't have the right to use sentient beings as things, as property, as resources, just as we don't have the right to use human sentient beings as things, as resources, as property. Until we actually stop buying into the various distortions and misinformation and disinformation about veganism, then we're always going to think it's some sort of lifestyle, or that you can be an ex-vegan. No, you can't be an ex-vegan. Just like if you're anti-racist, then hopefully you've internalized that otherizing a group based on their skin color or whatever, or whatever it is, or their gender or their sexual orientation, their however they present, classism and ableism and all of that, the different sorts of discriminations that otherize a certain group. Until we realize that veganism is just as important and equal to all those different otherizations, those different discriminations, then we don't even really truly understand those other discriminations and what that means. Because why do we stop short at a group just because they happen to be another species? That's just straight up speciesism. It's based on an irrelevant criterion. It doesn't matter that they're another species, they're sentient. So that's why, we have to stop trivializing and making excuses, particularly those on the left who make excuses for not being vegan. Oh, I'll do that. We need to focus on capitalism, or we need to focus on neoliberalism. We need to get socialism in before we can become vegan. I'll get to that after we've ended fracking. Or don't be silly, it's a lifestyle, or it's a, plant-based, it's a plant-based diet, and it's a personal choice in quotes. It ceases to be a personal choice when you're torturing and killing 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals every year for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure. 1 to 3 trillion. Have you watched Seaspiracy? Have you watched Cowspiracy? Have you watched What the Health? And yes, all those different ones tend to focus on certain aspects of the ancillary benefits of veganism. Of course, the environment is incredibly important because other animals live on this planet too, and we're going to take them all with us with this climate crisis. But still, the main focus should always be that veganism is an ethical position which rejects using animals as property, resources, and things. So when I say that there's no such thing as an ex-vegan, I mean there's no such thing as an anti-racist who has decided they're going to become a racist again. There can be, people can, but that means they never really internalized that anti-racist position in the first place. And these things are all things what we have to continue working on. As a white person, I have to continue working on the anti-racist thing and the privilege, being a white person, there's all this inbuilt privilege. There's all this conditioning of being always favored over other people in society and as a voice and all that kind of thing. And as Ajama Baraka from the Black Agenda Report said, he has to work on sexism every day. As a black man, he has to work on not being sexist every day because that's how we're raised. Different people are raised different way, and we live in a sexist, racist, white supremacist, generally speaking, in the West, as in society, it's sexist, racist, misogynist, classist, all those things. And depending on what family we were born into, what skin color, and so on, it depends on how we react in our environment and what privileges we get, and etc. It's upsetting to me that still veganism is still put on the back burner here as if it's not important, as if it's not as important as these other being anti-racist and all of that. The only reason any of us think that way is because we breathe, because animal use is like breathing. It's so ubiquitous and it's so acceptable today that we think that it's not as important, addressing this. And it's also, people think it's inconvenient. People think it's inconvenient to stop using animals and stop eating animal products. And it's not hard. I'm sorry, Arania, I love you, but it's not hard. It's only hard when we haven't internalized the ethical position. If we're doing it because if we haven't truly recognized that animals are sentient and they deserve the right not to be used as a thing. It's not hard for me at all. I could be in a room and I could be starving, and if nothing except animal products in the room, there'd be no way at all that I would consider eating animal products just because I was hungry. And it's becoming much, much easier today. Much, much easier. As somebody I knew once said, I'm vegan for the same set of reasons that I'm not a cannibal. Now, we wouldn't hopefully think about eating another person, knocking them on the head and eating them because we were hungry. And the same thing goes with being vegan. You wouldn't think about killing another sentient being just because you were hungry and just because they're non-human and you could get away with it. And people would think it's fine because animals are considered property. So these are things that I really wish the left in particular would consider and stop trivializing it in live streams and whatever, and stop sort of giggling about it and saying, oh yes, and placating an audience by saying, yes, I should really think about going vegan. And every time it's brought up, oh yes, I've thought about that, or I used to be that, or whatever. It's sort of depressing for me to watch this kind of thing, because it's like, the only reason we're saying and making up excuses and dilly-dallying and mocking people, even if it's gently, about being vegan and all of this is because if we do give it the attention and the gravitas that it deserves, that would mean we would have to do something about it, wouldn't it? That would mean if we truly looked at it and thought about it, that would mean we would have to do something about it ourselves, wouldn't it? And people sort of, it's one of these things that people think they want to get away with eating animal products for as long as they can, and maybe it'll never become a thing. It is becoming a thing. It's also destroying the planet. Our animal product consumption is destroying the planet. It's destroying the rainforests. It's destroying the oceans. It's sucking up the water. It's sucking up the land. It's actually a major driver of the climate crisis. It's destroying the Amazon rainforest at 5 acres a minute, I think. It used to be 2 acres. Now it's 5 acres a minute. They're burning the rainforest down for cow grazing and for soy to feed animals in animal feedlots all over the planet. It's destroying the ocean. Watch Seaspiracy, but watch Cowspiracy as well. It's also contributing to, animal use is contributing to these zoonotic diseases. People can go on and on about that it came from a lab and stuff. Maybe it did, but these are actually zoonotic diseases too. There is a list as long as both my arms of the things that is wrong with animal product consumption, but the major thing is that it's destroying the lives of sentient animals who love life just like we do and do not want to die. There's no difference between the dog and cat whom we live with, whom we love so much, and the cows, the sheep, the goats, the fish. Fish have lives too. They have sentience, they interact with one another, they love their life, they have self-awareness and so forth. There is no difference between, and the chickens, the same. Chickens love life, they're sentient, they have their own sort of likes, dislikes, behaviors with others. They're not machines. They're not here for us to be entertained by or for us to use their bodies as clothing. They're not here for us. And that's a human supremacist attitude that we need to get rid of, because within that attitude, it spreads out into other problems, other discriminations. Where we have one form of discrimination, speciesism, we will have all forms. That's sexism, heterosexism, classism, ableism, racism, and so forth. It's all faces of the same ignorance, and it all causes violence. You cannot have speciesism, not have all these other forms of violence. That's the bottom line. That's why the left needs to stop mocking vegans, stop trivializing the whole thing, stop calling it a lifestyle, stop saying they used to be vegan but now they're not, and on and on and on. I'm sorry, it really makes me, I get tired of it, and I sort of think people are only doing this because there's no pressure to actually look at it seriously. And they're also just feeding off nonsense from the corporate media and for YouTube influencers who are just cooking plant-based recipes all the time, never talking about why they're doing it, although a lot of people are probably doing it and they don't even know why they're doing it. They're doing it for health reasons, and that's an ancillary benefit. So I'm sorry, I just, when I start to watch something which, it's sort of, you look and these people, they're great people and really insightful and really for justice and nonviolence and want peace on the planet, and yet they start off with sort of this really what I see is almost early 21st century kind of discussion about, or back and forth about veganism. I think, wow, we are so behind, particularly on the left. We've made so many leaps forward in a way, because 10 years ago it was really glacial how veganism was taking hold, and now, there's a lot more vegans on the planet, and it's not so, you can actually see even restaurants and supermarkets, etc., bringing in vegan lines and vegan, veganized food and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's much easier to be vegan now than it was 10 years ago, believe me. That's a huge, but we don't need to be buying these pre-made products and commercial products, etc. We can eat a whole food plant-based diet, and there's plenty of alternatives to clothing. We don't need to be going to zoos and all this sort of stuff. We never did, and they could certainly eventually, if they actually wanted to, and they don't, but we could stop torturing hundreds of millions of animals, all kinds of species, and all these awful experiments, a lot of them whimsical. If animals weren't considered property, we would already be not using animals. So that's why we need to become vegan, so that our change in our consciousness, our recognition that animals are sentient, and they are, it needs to be a universal thing. It needs to be a universal change so we can evolve and actually bring peace to this planet in a real way. You cannot be murdering and torturing 1,000 animals or more a second on this planet and think that there could ever be peace. Ever be peace. It's not possible to have that much violence happening. 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals every year are tortured and killed for trivial reasons and mostly palate pleasure. You can't have that going on every second all over the planet, animals being tortured and murdered, and it not affect everything that's happening on the planet. It is not possible. It's not possible, and the left needs to grasp that. That is this at the center of everything, that we can be that unconscious that we can think it's okay. Would we be okay if everybody was torturing puppies in front of us and then eating them? Would we be okay with that? And yet we are okay with someone else in some out-of-sight, awful place, a slaughterhouse, torturing and killing animals for us so we can eat them. If we're not okay with somebody torturing puppies in front of us and eating them, hitting them on the head and then putting them on a roast and eating them, then why are we okay with all of this going on out of our sight so we don't have to think about it. And even if we were okay and we're some kind of psychopath with somebody torturing puppies in front of us and then killing them and eating them, I mean, there's no difference between the puppies and the animals that are in these slaughterhouses. There isn't. They're all sentient. Just different appearances, but that's irrelevant. But even if we were okay with that, that still doesn't make it right that somebody is okay with that. We have to recognize that sentience is all that matters. We're sentient, they're sentient, they're fellow earthlings, and we need to leave them alone. Stop oppressing and killing the most vulnerable group on the planet. When we can do that to the most vulnerable group on the planet, what does that say about us? And that's why we will never have peace until we become vegan and stop using other animals as things.